Hello, everyone. It's Sunday night, October 2nd, 2022, and I'm Glenn Rawson. We're just coming off of the end of a wonderful, wonderful general conference, and I hope to be able to say a couple things about that tonight. First of all, welcome. Thank you for joining me tonight, and I hope and pray that something is said tonight that will be edifying and certainly, at least, will not detract from the conference we've enjoyed today. A couple of announcements right off the bat. First of all, remember that Saturday, October 22nd, at the Dixie Center in St. George, History of the Saints will be presenting its next Knowing Joseph conference. We talk about Joseph Smith in the title of the conference, but this conference will be really about Joseph Smith, about church history, about the restoration. The theme of this one is going to be finding hope through the restoration. And the speakers, myself, Gaina Lynn Condi, Heidi Tucker, and Susan Easton Black. I hope it will be a very edifying experience. There are tickets still available at historyofthesaints.org. So again, that's Saturday, October 22nd, St. George Dixie Center. Tickets available at historyofthesaints.org. That's a Saturday. It'll be from 9 in the morning until 4 in the afternoon. Also, another announcement. This book, very close to my heart, especially after some experiences that I had in the last couple of days. This is Joseph Smith Jr., Testimonies of Those Who Knew Him. This beautiful book, full of powerful stories about those who knew the prophet Joseph Smith. I'll be speaking about and of this book tonight, and I hope that I'll explain more about why I'm making reference to this book at the beginning now, but this book is available at historyofthesaints.org for any of you that are interested, and I'll talk about hopefully why some of you may be interested later on. All right. So as I begin tonight, I ask for your prayers, and I mean that with all of my heart. I ask for your prayers. And I would ask tonight with the stories I'm going to share, feel free to share this whole fireside or any portion thereof with as many people as you can, because some things I'll talk about tonight are probably some of the most important stories I've ever shared. Now, first of all, General Conference. What a wonderful experience. I've texted and talked with family and others, and I cannot even begin to describe what a deeply personal and emotional experience this conference was. And it's because of General Conference that I want to share this first story with you. You would consider it, I suppose, a parable, but the story is nonetheless true. When I was just a little boy of about 6 years of age, a fierce summer thunderstorm struck near our home on the Lemhi. The thunder and lightning were so fierce it scared me. I remember running in terror to my mother, and she comforted me. That time it seemed to me as if the world had gone crazy and was coming down around me. Well, 4 decades or so later, my oldest son was hospitalized in Salt Lake City. We were living in Idaho. I made frequent trips to Salt Lake to be with him. One night I left Salt Lake quite late and started home for Idaho. As I traveled north up Interstate 15, the January weather got worse. Soon it was snowing. Then it was a storm, and finally it was an all-out blizzard and a whiteout. The huge flakes of snow seemed to come straight at me as I drove along, swallowing up my headlights and hypnotizing my vision. I couldn't look straight ahead. You know what this is like. The snow covered the road, obliterating the white lines. So dense and thick was the storm that I could only see a few feet in front of me. I went slower and slower as the storm got worse. I couldn't see. I couldn't tell actually where the road was. And several times I drove right off the road. Now, the worst part of that whole journey was climbing up and over Malad Summit. I began to wonder if I was really going to make it. Now, I couldn't stop, not in the middle of the road. Someone would run over me, or I would sit up there and freeze to death. I had to keep going, but I couldn't see where I was going. Finally, in desperation, I developed a tactic that gave me some measure of success. Instead of looking straight ahead, I looked out the window to the right, kind of at an angle like that. And out of the corner of my eye to the right, I could see the reflector posts. I could barely see them, and sometimes I missed them altogether. As I drove along slowly, passing those posts when I could see them, I mentally gauged the distance and steered my car according to those reflective marker posts. I also was assisted occasionally by the buried rumble strips on the right side of the road. For more than 60 miles, I drove like this at speeds from 5 to 30 miles per hour. And then finally, just south of Pocatello, I finally drove out of it. By the time I got home, to say the least, I was exhausted. The strain had been terrible. It was the worst blizzard I had ever driven in to that point. I was grateful, finally, to be home. Those reflective marker posts on my right are like the prophets, seers, and revelators of Almighty God. They reflect His light, and they stand firm and are sure and certain on our journey in a stormy, darkening world. No matter who or what says otherwise, they can be trusted to see us safely and happily into eternity. Look right for the light. Next story. I don't know if any of you are related to this wonderful man, but I suspect someone listening might be. In December 1833, William Black Davis and his wife, Sarah, were baptized into the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints by Elder Simeon Carter. The weather was cold, requiring the ice to be broken on the stream in order to perform the ordinance. Can you imagine? After baptism, the spirit of gathering came upon them, and they immigrated from their native Pennsylvania to gather with the saints, first to Ohio and then to Illinois. The family records the following story of William. Quote, "He had by his jovial kindness made many friends among those not of his faith, and these too tried hard to get him to forsake his religion and live amongst them. They reasoned with him that it was foolish for him to endure persecution and lose his all time after time for a mere fanatical religion and to follow vainly a false prophet. How much better, they argued, to give up Mormonism and enjoy peace and prosperity, free from molestation. As an instance of their efforts to get him to renounce his religion and leave the church, the following will suffice. Upon one occasion of a particularly violent mob attack, the leaders of the mob sent a lady ahead to interview Brother Davis. She came into his home in a friendly spirit, crying, "Oh, good news, Mr. Davis." "Well," said Brother Davis, "tell me the good news you bring." She replied, "The mob is coming, well armed to drive the Mormons out, but they sent me to tell you not to be afraid. You will be unmolested, and all you have to do is burn the Book of Mormon and declare that Joseph Smith is a fallen prophet, and you will escape." "Well," said Brother Davis, "the mob can have my answer when they come." It meant another driving, another home lost by persecution. But William Davis was learning, as all the saints learned, the truth of the Savior, saying that he who is faithful must suffer persecution. He had already had experience with mobs. So, hastily gathering up much food and clothing as could be piled into a wagon with his family, he left his home and all his possessions to the mob, nor did he ever see it again. End of quote. William Black Davis was a cheerful and kind soul with an ability to make friends, yet he was a saint, a man of courage and conviction, and the Lord loved him for it. Yes, Brother and Sister Davis lost their home in Missouri, gave up another one in Nauvoo, but in the end, they had an eternal home and family. William Black Davis was one of the original colonizing fathers of Box Elder, Utah, otherwise known as Brigham City, Utah. On August 18th and 19th, 1877, elderly President Brigham Young came to the Box Elder Stake of Zion for a conference. It would be President Young's last speaking and last mortal conference. As he took the stand and looked down, he saw the aged and now blind patriarch William Davis seated in the audience. President Young asked for 2 comfortable chairs. They were brought forward and in honor placed on the stand for William and Sarah Davis. 33 years after he first trod the site of Brigham City, after much struggle, work, and pleasant memories, William Davis passed away on November 22nd, 1883, at the age of 88. If and when we are called to lay down our all for the kingdom of God, whether it be by a ministering assignment or something so much more dramatic, if we will pay the Lord first, look to Him and make that sacrifice, He always repays well. Next story. In the summer of 1843, the Thomas Colborne family was living in Nauvoo, down by the Mississippi River. Shortly after their arrival in Nauvoo, a gentleman rode up in the yard and inquired for Thomas Colborne. Colborne's 9-year-old daughter, Sarah, relates the following account. She said, quote, "I did not know who it was, but there was something so noble and dignified in this man's appearance that it struck me forcibly. My father soon came out and shook him cordially by the hand and called him Brother Joseph. I knew then that it was the prophet. Father invited him in, and he alighted and followed him into the house. He soon told his errand. It was quite an exciting time just then. The prophet had been falsely accused of an attempt to murder Governor Boggs of Missouri. The mobbers had tried every means to take him and had made their boast that if they got him, he never should return alive. Porter Rockwell, a firm friend of Joseph's, had been kidnapped and taken to Missouri as an accomplice and was about to have his trial. But money was scarce wherewith to pay the lawyer's fees. Joseph requested my father to lend him $100 to pay the lawyer who defended Porter Rockwell, explained the situation, and father freely counted out the money. This shall be returned within 3 days if I'm alive, said the prophet, and he departed. My aunt, father's sister, who was camped with us, was quite wrathy and called my father very foolish and unwise. Don't you know, Thomas, said she, you will never see a cent of that money again. Here are your family without a home, and now you throw your money away." "Don't worry, Katie," Father replied. "If he cannot pay it, he is welcome to it." This conversation was held before us children, and I thought seriously about it. Would he pay it, or would he not? But I had strong faith that he would. The day came when it was to be paid, a cold, wet, rainy day. The day passed. Night came. 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, and we all retired for the night. Shortly after, there was a knock at the door. Father arose and went to it, and there in the driving rain stood the prophet Joseph. "Here, Brother Thomas, is the money." A light was struck, and seated at the table, he counted out the $100 in gold. He said, "Brother Thomas, I've been trying all day to raise this sum, for my honor was at stake. God bless you." End quote. Sarah said, "My aunt had nothing to say. She afterwards left the church." My testimony is that Joseph Smith was truly a prophet of God. This incident, Sarah said, I have related, strengthened my testimony. End quote. Now, consider this about that story. Not since Jesus Christ himself has so much depended on one man's integrity as on Joseph Smith. If he was an honest man and telling the truth about what he saw and received of heaven and angels, then the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has the single greatest message for the peace and happiness of mankind since the atoning sacrifice of the Lord Jesus Christ and his message on earth. But if Joseph was a liar, a cheat, and a fraud by character, then all of it, all of what is so-called Mormonism, is a damnable lie. There is no middle ground. Each must decide for himself, was Joseph a good man and a man of integrity, or was he not? Only heaven can ultimately reveal that truth. That story, more like it, are the reason I show you this book. I had the experience, and I won't say whom, of talking with friends this week, one of whom is struggling with a testimony of the prophet Joseph Smith. And I explained to them just what I told you. If Joseph was an honest man telling the truth, then all of it is true. But if he lied about this, especially the first vision, and the things that followed after, but especially that first vision, then none of it's true. So much depends on his integrity. All right, let's take a break for a second. I hope you're doing okay. Are you all right? I wanted to let you know that this week, myself and about 40 some others are taking off on Wednesday, going up through Idaho to Rexburg, from Rexburg to Teton Valley, from Teton Valley over into Jackson Hole, from Jackson Hole and down into Star Valley, from Star Valley over the mountain to Bear Lake and the Bear Lake country, and over the mountain from there to Logan, and from Logan to back home. We'll be gone Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And on that journey over those places, we're going to talk about church history, wonderful pioneers, state history, through Idaho, Wyoming, Utah. We're going to have a wonderful time and look at the fall colors as we go. Enjoy the beautiful scenery and just all together have a fun, relaxing, and hopefully spirit-filled 3 days together. There are seats still available on the bus. If you'd like to come, contact GlennRawsonStories.com, and I'm sure we could find a way to fit you in if you still wanted to come. But be that as it may, you're invited, and I'd love to have you. And also, I wanted to let you know that the end of October, on the 26th of October, I'm going back to Israel again for 2 more tours with Fun for Less Tours. Now, both of those tours are sold out. But I think there is a tour with Fun for Less that's going to Thailand, Myanmar, Vietnam, Cambodia, and places like that in February. That tour is still open. And no, that's not a church history tour. That's definitely the history and culture of the Far East. But if you're interested in going, go to funforlesstours.com. And then also, I suppose you could say I'm giving you excuses as to why my firesides suffer a little bit, but in the end of January 2023, a group of us are going back to San Diego. We leave from Salt Lake, we drive to San Diego, we talk about settlements and church history and pioneer history all the way to San Diego. And when we get to San Diego, we go out on the Mormon Battalion Trail and talk about the entire story of the Mormon Battalion and show you the places where it happened. That tour is at GlennRawsonStories.com, and I would love to have you. So just in case you're interested, that's some of where I'm going and who I'm going with and who I'm going for over the next couple of months. All right. I think I've given away just about every copy I have, but I want you to know this book here is also still available, Tempering Steel. I don't have a sequel segment for you tonight, but I should have one by next week. This book is available at historyofthesaints.org, GlennRawsonStories.com. If you need a good novel and a fun read, this one, I think, will be clean, edifying, and perhaps interesting to you. All right, next story. George was born in London in 1839. From a very early age, George showed an inclination to music. When he was still a boy, he went to work in a shoemaking factory where the foreman himself, a musician, saw the lad's talent. So he loaned him a violin and helped the boy learn to play. Later, he sponsored that boy to attend school. At the age of 10, George began attending the London Choir School. Then, at age 11, George was, and we don't know the rest of the story, he was baptized a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This decision evidently did not come painlessly. Elder Claudio R.M. Costa relates the following story about George. Quote, he was 11 years old when he joined the church in England in 1850. George had a clear soprano voice and gave up a position in a cathedral choir, including a salary and a free musical education, when he accepted the gospel. It would appear not only that George's family did not join the church with him, or at least stay with it. Again, returning to Elder Costa's quote, not long after, George's father gave him an ultimatum that he either give up his music and learn a trade or leave home. George moved out. He was 13. In 1859, George enrolled in the Royal Academy of Music in London and passed the 4-year course of study in only 3 years. By 1862, this gifted young man was playing professionally. And then, as Elder Costa relates, during the next 2 years, George played under many of the famous conductors then working in London. He also conducted the Goswell Branch Choir and presented concerts for church members and their friends as part of the London Conference meetings. George's career path seemed set, and he was on his way to becoming a prominent musician in London society, but then came a most remarkable event. One Sunday evening, early in 1864, Elder William Staines, a missionary in the London Conference, approached him. "Brother George," he said, "I had a dream about you last night and was shown that you were advancing so rapidly in your profession that your fame and fortune would be made if you remained in London, and that you would not be able to sacrifice it if you did not immigrate to Zion this year." Elder Staines then counseled George to sail for Utah on the next ship, offering to advance him the money if need be. After laboring with George for half an hour, Elder Staines said, "You are wanted in Zion, and I want you to go. What do you say?" George said, "I will go." It was a difficult voyage and journey across the plains for George. He arrived in Salt Lake ill, nearly starved. And as soon as he arrived, he was approached by a friend he had known in England who declared, quote, "Brother George, I'm pleased to see you, yet sorry you have come, because there are several music teachers here now and they cannot make a living." End of quote. "Brother Bentley," George responded, "I will stay with my music for 2 years. If I starve, you will have to bury me." End of quote. So much for being wanted in Zion. Well, to his credit, George persisted and within 2 years had attracted enough students to provide himself a comfortable living. And then it happened. In 1865, President Brigham Young approached him and said, quote, "Brother George, I have a mission for you. I want you to be chief musician of the church. I want you to take the tabernacle choir and the theater orchestra and lay a foundation for good music." End of quote. Brother George was George Edward Percy Careless. George Careless. And he went on to greatness. Until his death in 1932, George was at the hub of the church's musical activities. Not only did he lead the choir and orchestra, he continued to compose and arrange hymns. He had a hand in bringing forth the official hymnal of the church, which included many of the hymns he had written. Careless also served on the General Music Committee into the final year of his life. End of quote. He was, indeed, needed in Zion. And if you heard and loved the choir today, you can impart thank George Careless. Next story. In the summer of 1832, Joseph Smith the prophet, with the assistance of his friend Frederick G. Williams, began writing the history of the Church of Jesus Christ. As far as we have record, it was the first time Joseph ever wrote of what would later be called his first vision. Altogether, as the years would follow, there would come numerous accounts of that vision. no two of those accounts of the first vision saying exactly the same thing, which is precisely why I tell you this story and why it troubles so many people today. Please consider the following words as Joseph wrote them, and especially as I share this, consider what this vision meant just for him personally. Quoting Joseph, "At about the age of 12 years, my mind became seriously impressed with regard to the all-important concerns for the welfare of my immortal soul, which led me to searching the Scriptures. My mind became exceedingly distressed, for I became convicted of my sins, and by searching the Scriptures, I found that man did not come unto the Lord, but that they had apostatized from the true and living faith, and there was no society or denomination that built upon the gospel of Jesus Christ as recorded in the New Testament. And I felt to mourn for my own sins and for the sins of the world. I cried unto the Lord for mercy, for there was none else to whom I could go and obtain mercy. And the Lord heard my cry in the wilderness. And while in the attitude of calling upon the Lord, a pillar of fire, light, he would later say, above the brightness of the sun at noonday, came down from above and rested upon me. And I was filled with the Spirit of God, and the heavens opened upon me, and I saw the Lord. And he spake unto me, saying, Joseph, thy sins are forgiven thee. Go thy way, walk in my statutes, and keep my commandments. Behold, I am the Lord of glory. I was crucified for the world, that all those who believe on my name may have eternal life. The world lieth in sin at this time, and none doeth good, no, not one. They have turned aside from the gospel, and keep not my commandments. They draw near to me with their lips, while their hearts are far from me. And mine anger is kindling against the inhabitants of the earth, to visit them according to their ungodliness, and to bring to pass that which hath been spoken by the mouths of the prophets and apostles. Behold, and lo, I come quickly, as is written of me in the Scriptures, the glory of my Father. Joseph then said, My soul was filled with love, and for many days I could rejoice with great joy, and the Lord was with me, but could find none that would believe the heavenly vision. End quote. Those are Joseph's his own words, and his first attempt at writing down his first vision. It appears that as he wrote it that first time, so it stood, and there were few revisions. Whatever else it means, this account of the first vision reveals that it was a very personal spiritual conversion experience for Joseph himself. He did not speak of the ramifications to all mankind, not directly. He sought diligently the forgiveness of his sins, and imagine his joy when that blessing was received. Considering that, Joseph was by nature careful in speaking of sacred things. Is it possible that he here in 1832 shared only one perspective or dimension on a rich, multifaceted theophany? And that only as much as we needed to know now? Could Joseph have said even more about his vision experience than all the combined accounts together share? Yes, of course. Joseph never shared all that he saw and heard in that vision. Now, take this for what it's worth. Knowing that some are troubled by numerous accounts of the first vision. Some years back, I gathered up all the accounts, the 4 major accounts of the first vision, laid them on the table side by side, and studied them. And this is what I learned. They do not contradict. Each telling of the story fits together. They weave together like the strands of a tapestry to tell a beautiful story, only a portion of which now we moderns are allowed to know. Ultimately, it is not by Joseph's written words to all the world that we know he spoke truth, but God's revealed words to us personally. So if you or anyone you know struggles with Joseph Smith, whether or not he was an honest man of integrity, or whether he told the truth in the first vision, go. Ask God. It is absolutely vital to your salvation and others to know that answer. Now, I don't know why I've told this story before, but it came forcefully to me that I need to share it again. Could be just me. Brigham Frederick Grant, affectionately known by his associates as B.F. Grant, was born October 17th, 1856 in Salt Lake City. When he was less than 6 months old, his father, Jedediah Grant of the First Presidency, passed away, having worn out his life in the Lord's service. When B.F. was 2 years old, his mother married out of the church and left the area. The child, B.F., was sent to live with a family in Richmond, Utah. During his time living in Richmond, Bishop Mariner Wood Merrill came to know and love that boy. He wanted to take him in as one of his own. Evidently, B.F., who never learned, because of where he did live, to read or write, was unhappy with this situation and made plans to run away. B.F. arranged with a wagon boss to catch a freight company into the mining camps of Montana. The boy carried it out and disappeared, right up the gold road through Idaho into Montana, leaving behind family, friends, and the faith of his fathers. It is reported that B.F. became a very profane man, and that he hadn't the slightest interest in the gospel of Jesus Christ. All of this deeply troubled his older brother, Heber J. Grant. Elder Grant shared those concerns with his friend and colleague, Mariner Wood Merrill. And according to President Grant, Elder Merrill would always smile and say, "Well, Brother Grant, don't you worry about that brother of yours. He'll come back all right. Mark my words." Then, Elder Merrill, on one occasion, told Heber how the night after B.F. had run away, that Elder Merrill began to feel almost, as he said, rebellious. He had told his wife about how the boy had lost his father at such a young age, and his mother had now married out of the church and abandoned him, and now this boy will be without father or mother and will undoubtedly go to the bad. I feel as if the Lord ought to have inspired me to take this boy away. I learned to love him, Elder Merrill said, almost like one of my own children. End of quote. That very night, Elder Merrill experienced the following dream, which he shared with B.F. Grant's brother, Heber J. Grant. He said, I saw your brother traveling from one place to another with the vilest kind of company. But wherever he was always surrounded by a light. In my dream, I asked, what does that light mean? And a voice answered, that light is the influence of a faithful father to protect the boy from committing sin whereby he cannot come back into the fold. Then, Elder Merrill said, I saw him come back to Utah. I saw him join the church and become a hard, diligent worker, traveling through the stakes of Zion, laboring among the wayward, careless, and indifferent and profane young man all over the church, and meeting with marvelous success. That is why I've told you time and time again during the years that your brother took no interest in the church and was a very profane man, that he would eventually come back and labor among the youth of Zion. End of quote. The rest of that story? B.F. Grant eventually did come back, and the dream was fulfilled in every particular. B.F. Grant became particularly active in working with the young men and was part of the committee that sponsored the first scouting activities of the church. It is said that in one single winter, B.F. Grant got over 500 boys into the Mutual Improvement Associations in Salt Lake County. B.F. Grant passed away in 1936, firm in the faith and full of years. He was a successful businessman, civic leader, family man, and servant of the Lord. I witness to you the influence of our faithful fathers and mothers carries on beyond the grave. Their love and concern for us and their ministering to us does not end at death. My dear friends, I hope you have a great week. I hope as soon as opportunity presents itself, you go back over the conference talks until they are ingrained on the fleshy tables of the heart. I know I plan to. Good night, God bless, and I love you.